From the Journalism and New Media Department of St. Joseph's University, Brooklyn, I'm Dustin Bailey.
I'm Barbare, Sturua.
And I'm Gamba, Ellis.
And this is Iconic New York.
New York City has a rich history of what can be defined as club culture, dating back as far as the turn of the 20th century. Cabarets, speakeasies, drag balls, and rent parties are well documented throughout the city's history as havens for not only lovers of music and dance, but more often than not, spaces for marginalized communities to congregate and share in collective expression of culture.
From Harlem's houses as the birthplace of the Vogue, and lest we forget the coining of the term throwing shade, Dave Mancuso's scene-altering, invitation-only DJ parties at the Loft, which spawned loft parties the world over.
You know, I don't even really know where to begin, because it seems like...
To Larry Levan's stylings at Paradise Garage, often the after-party for its famous contemporary Studio 54. New York's dance scene has always innovated in its promotion and visibility of the communities that inspired its culture.
While disco began to fade away in the early 80s, Chicago's Frankie Knuckles innovated the house sound that took off in the UK, where days-long warehouse raves invited everyone in to dance along. No restrictions, no limitations, no entry fees. As beautiful as it sounds, such diversity, change, and free expression sounded like a threat to the norm, and new measures were taken to ban these gatherings. But the restrictions didn't stop people from chasing freedom. Instead, the new laws implemented created a revolutionary movement of underground music, and clubs became once again a symbol of liberation and individualism.
While really digging into the history of the New York dance scene, one thing stood out as immediately apparent. Club culture goes hand in hand with freedom of expression. The only way to count yourself as unwelcome at a rave is to be discriminating. The importance of being free to yourself has been essential to the LGBTQ community, where scrutiny from a society lacking a full acceptance can feel oppressive in the day-to-day. The rave and club scene acts as a release valve from all of the daily scrutiny.
The music has evolved and changed shape from decade to decade, but the message has always been the same. All are welcome here. In a Harlem ballroom, a massive London warehouse, or a sweaty underground basement, this is a place where you are free to be yourself.
We spoke with Mckenzie Wark, a professor of media and cultural studies at the New School, and author of several books including the recently released Raving, an exploration of the queer and trans rave scene and its connection to society at large.
And DJ Preskool, a 74-year-old staple of the contemporary Brooklyn and Queens techno house scene, a lifelong counterculturist, community organizer, and self-proclaimed hippie who has experienced the transition of dance culture throughout several decades.
We're the party that knows this world is already out to kill us. This line from Wark's book really stands out as profound, as beautiful, and tragic. It underlines the importance of raves and clubs as refuge.
The book is about illegal raves, which ironically I mostly feel a bit safer in than regular clubs. And they're places where queer and trans people might not be the majority, but queer and trans rules sort of govern the space.
And that coincides with her idea that it's truly the only place some people feel safe. She also mentions that the very idea of a safe space probably derived from the ballrooms.
It's something that DJ Preskool talks about too. The party is a backdrop for peaceful coexistence, like there's a unique air of inclusivity baked in.
We wouldn't meet on the street, or maybe I don't hang around with you, but for that couple of hours, we're vibing together. Yeah, and you get me and I get you. And like, honestly, dude, that's all I want to do for the rest of my life.
Inclusivity being baked in speaks to the history of the scene, as it pertains to who it was that shaped the early sounds.
Wark would also assert that while most people consider techno German music, that instead it's black music, with the Harlem ballrooms as the birthplace of house, while techno stems from other predominantly black communities.
So there's several generations of Detroit black techno producers kind of created as a genre. It comes into club culture through Chicago, and it's being played by black gay DJs in Chicago, and sort of from there to the world. And it then ends up in Berlin.
From the ground up, it was built by people who knew how it felt to be discriminated against, and the desire to protect each other from that feeling.
The way I look at it is, first off, there would be no house, there would be no techno, there would be no club culture without marginalized communities.
Where I grew up in Tbilisi and all over Europe, it's so much more common to be a raver. But it's an interesting question, though, of why house music? Why techno?
At the end of the day, it's dance music, right? Music made with dancing in mind. And DJ Preskool has some theories about certain BPMs, heartbeats, and vibrations, which could be convincing, but his mention of the genre's inherent positivity is relevant.
But there's nothing more positive than house music when you've got incredible beats with great lyrics. It just reaches your soul, and that is so essential because there's no point in having a society where people don't feel good inside. Like, the reason people are evil is because they're all messed up inside.
It's like Wark says in her book, utilizing music as our voice, chaos can take shape in a new tomorrow.
But the scene still faces its own scrutinies, as the community itself always has. It's typical of a countercultural movement or gathering to be discredited in the mainstream.
In Europe, we think of clubbing as more of just entertainment, but here there is a bit more of a political undertone. There is certainly more of a community built around it.
And demonization of the community as well. The scene is often depicted as a drug culture, which is a pretty false equivalence when you consider other genres of music having just as much affiliation with drug usage. The rave community, at least, takes steps to make it safer.
You know, but I think that you've got a lot, particularly the women's DJ group in New York has been a real leader in getting like fentanyl test, strips at clubs.
I mean, I think the thing that you learn is drugs aren't the main course. They're sort of a spice you can add, and if you are in a bad frame of mind, drugs aren't going to make it better.
For New York's part, the city provides a setting pre-built with a storied history of building and preserving communities and being on the front line of social change.
And the more of that we could do now is really what we need, because building strong communities is the only safeguard we have to the kind of fascist shit that's coming down from the federal government and all these other people.
In the clubs, for those few precious hours, none of those pressures exist. After interviewing our guests and speaking with a number of young people, the diversity speaks volumes about the sensibility to bring people together. When the room darkens and the beat drops, it's the great equalizer.
Like, the nightlife isn't utopia. People bring all of the tensions and aggressions of everyday life through the door with them. It's just a question of whether or not the space can sort of dissipate and manage those energies.
As Wark says, New York is a city of maximum extraction. Rave can never be utopia. There's no pretense that the rave scene, like any other scene, is without flaws. The question is why it's held to a different standard.
One thing is for certain. New York City will continue to be a haven for the sound it helped to build and foster, and it's uniquely poised to do so.
But it's just bodies very close to each other, very exposed to each other, and particularly in the city where we're like rubbing up against each other all the time. This is a way we get to be familiar with each other and available to each other.
It's visibility, exposure to, and empathy for different cultures at the end of the day. In that way, the club scene acts as a microcosm for what New York City has always stood for.
Special thanks to DJ SNX.